Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to not only Tanakh study, but the 7th day of Passover when we're liberated and the sea opened up for us. We have a really fun day today because we're going to be studying Devorah, the prophetess. So what I want to do is I want to start off by, we want to start off with a blessing for studying Torah. So that's what we're going to do first. And if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah. Amen. And now I'm going to share, some of you may have seen this already. We use this for one of our services. This is Deborah's song, Devorah. Somebody asked me if Devorah and Deborah are the same thing. Yes, Devorah is the Hebrew pronunciation and Deborah is the English. So this is a song that was written by Debbie Friedman about Devorah. So I thought it'd be fun to start with that. We are so fortunate in this congregation to have such talented people. For those of you who don't know, the young lady who was singing is the daughter of the gentleman she was singing with, Rina Maduro, and she's got an amazing voice. And She may become an opera singer one day. She's thinking about that. Her father also has a wonderful, wonderful voice, Morris Maduro. And then the person playing the guitar is Jory Yarmoff. And not only are they really talented musically, but technically as well, because they're the ones who edited all that. So we're just really very, very lucky. So I think you got a little sense of who Devorah is from that, song. But we're going to now read a little bit from the book of Judges. So I'm going to share that with you as well. So we had started, we had read some of the verses here, the first like 10 verses. But I think we should reread it just to get the context. So who would like to read, please?
I'll read.
Okay, Doug, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, you go ahead, Jane, you go.
Okay, yeah, you saw all the hard words.
Okay, this is the fourth chapter of the book of Judges.
Okay. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim. Because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried to the Lord for help. Now, Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidot, was leading Israel at the time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes settled. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." "Certainly I will go with you," said Deborah. "But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera in the hands of a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. There Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command. Deborah also went with him.
Okay, let's just stop for 1 second. I just want to point a couple things out. Thank you. Okay. So remember that supposedly Joshua had conquered, the area that King Hazor was in charge of, and he killed him, but he's still alive. Obviously, as I said, the book of Joshua has certain victories that apparently are no longer the case. Once we're in Judges, you could say, well, the king arose again. There was a new king, or he was never killed in the first place. And remember that the sort of structure of the whole history here, the Deuteronomic history, starting with Joshua and going to the end of Kings, is that the Israelites do bad, they sin, God punishes them, and then somebody arises to lead them in the right direction. Ehud, you might remember, was a left-handed judge. Remember, there are a bunch of judges here who are, sort of misfits. So this guy was left-handed. Gideon is the son of a concubine, which, we'll get to. We've got all these sort of misfits, and then we have a woman who is not a misfit. In fact, she is described not only as a judge, but also as a prophetess, and she's the only one described that way. She's the wife of Lapidot, and Lapidot and Barak, her general, both basically connote flashes of lightning. And Deborah is a fiery woman who apparently made wicks for the tabernacle. And of course, the rabbis will say, well, it was really her husband. Lapidot was really Barak. Same person, the husband of Devorah, they're really the ones who are the military commanders. Well, maybe, but you see that Barak won't even do anything unless she, builds up his confidence and goes with him. Okay, so let's continue. You see that the Canaanites, not Canaanites, but Canaanites, Kenites, they are in league with the Israelites. Okay, so we can continue here on verse 11. You want to continue, Jane?
Yeah, fine. Now Heber the Kenite had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and pitched his tent by the great tree in give me a minute, Za'ananim near Kadesh. When they told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Haroset Hagoyim to the Kishon River all his men and his 900 chariots fitted with iron. But this isn't the Iron Age yet. Then Deborah, I'm just pointing that out. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Haroset Hagoyim, and all Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was left. Sisera, meanwhile, fled on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Yael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent and she covered him with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone in there?' say no." But Yael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and then he died. Just then Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Yael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites. And the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him.
Thank you. So let's take a quick look at this scene here, because we're going to have another version of it in a moment. Starting at verse 19. So what can you say about this little scene here between Yael and Sisera?
It's pretty scary.
Okay.
Kind of disgusting.
He is an enemy, and we'll see what he would have done had he been the conqueror and the victor. But what else can we say about this?
How much strength does it take to drive a peg through your head?
Probably a lot.
I mean, she must be very strong.
Yeah, there's some strong women in here. When King David is escaping because Saul's trying to kill him, his wife lets him out the window on a rope. You can imagine how strong you have to be to hold on to a man hanging from a rope, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else? What about the water and the milk?
Well, she's being very hospitable. She's giving him more than he asked for.
Okay.
Okay. And
Yeah.
she's treating him like a baby.
Right.
She's covering him up, and then she's giving him milk so he can go to sleep, I mean, it's very maternal.
Exactly. It's very maternal. So she's turning that maternal image on its head, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's asking for water, and she offers him milk. and she's giving him milk and she's covering him with a blanket, exactly what a mother would do. It seems like a very soft, warm, fuzzy thing to be doing. And then she drives a tent peg into his head. So not really, hopefully, what a mother would do to her baby, right? So it's a very powerful and very interesting scene. We're going to see a lot more about it in a moment, but just want to see if there were any other comments before we move on. Okay, so yes, Dan.
Well, dwelling in tent suggests nomadic. Since there, I mean, Hazor was actually a fairly large city.
Yes.
State, but these people were outside Hazor. They were south Hazor and were tent dwellers.
Good. So yeah, Hazor was a very important city, supposedly conquered by Joshua, killing the king, but there it is, still standing. You could go through and compare the two books and see places that were supposedly taken over that are still there. Again, you could say, if you were not looking at it from a scholarly point of view, well, you know, the city was destroyed, but it came back to life, whatever, but probably it was that it wasn't destroyed and the king was not killed. So now we just had a prose version of this story. We are going to now move to the poetic version, because Devorah has a song, a poem, which are similar in Hebrew, which is one of the oldest pieces in the Torah, in the Bible. You know, we have the Song of the Sea, Michamocha, which is one of the older songs, which we think actually is Miriam's song, not Moses' song. And now we have Devorah's song. And let's take a look. Got to go to the next chapter, and then maybe Doug can pick it up. Okay, Judges 5, please. Yes, here we are. Okay. Please.
On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. When the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. Hear this, you kings, listen, you rulers. I, even I, will sing to the Lord. I will praise the Lord, the God of Israel, in song. When you, Lord, went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Yael, the highways were abandoned. Travelers took to winding paths. Villagers in Israel would not fight. They held back until I, Deborah, arose, until I arose, a mother in Israel.
Let me just stop for 1 second. So before Devorah came along, there was danger on the highways, okay? Because there were marauding bands of Canaanites. And so it was very dangerous. Remember, this is part, you know, the punishment for the Israelites having sinned. So not only, you know, were they punished by, you know, attacks for the Canaanites as far as, you know, military attacks, but also on the road. So it was not even safe to travel around. Okay, thank you.
God chose new leaders when war came to the city gates, but not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's princes, with the willing volunteers among the people. Praise the Lord. You who ride on white donkeys, sitting on your saddle blankets, and you who walk along the road, consider the voice of the singers at the watering places. They recite the victories of the Lord, the victories of his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the city gates.
Okay, I'm going to stop you 1 more second. And so now in verse 11, rather than the sound of arrows, because that was one of the ways that people were attacked, now the wells are safe. Thanks to Devorah, you know, presiding over Israel, the wells are now safe. The highways are now safe. Things are really, really good, thanks to her. Okay.
Wake up, Devorah, wake up, break out in song. Arise, Barak, take captive your captives, son of Abinoam.
By the way, in Hebrew, wake up is Uri, Uri. That was part of the song that Debbie Friedman wrote. Uri, Uri, Shir Dabiri. Okay, yeah.
The remnant of the nobles came down, the people of the Lord came down to me against the mighty. Some came from Ephraim, whose roots were in Amalek. Benjamin was with the people who followed you. From Machir, captains came down. From Zebulun, those who bear a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Yes, Issachar was with Barak, sent under his command into the valley. In the districts of Reuben, there was such searching of heart. Why did you stay among the sheep and still hear the whistling of for the flocks? In the districts of Reuben, there was much searching of heart. Gilead stayed behind the Jordan, and Dan, why did he linger by the ships? Asher remained on the coast and stayed in his coves. The people of Zebulun risked their very lives. So did Naphtali on the terraced fields.
Okay, so you see all these different tribes. Some of them joined, some of them stayed behind, right? And by the way, these judges, each one is a judge really of one tribe, and then other tribes join them to fight against the Canaanites, but it's not necessarily all the tribes at one time, even though you sort of get that impression. Yes?
Didn't Reuben promise to come with shock troops? He had the land on the other side of the river and he could keep it if he promised to war with the rest of Israel?
Yeah, well, do people keep their promises?
Yeah.
But thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, he probably promised, and then it was like, maybe not this time. Okay, please continue.
Kings came, they fought. The kings of Canaan fought. At Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo, they took no plunder of silver. From the heavens the stars fought. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon. March on, my soul, be strong.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there a second. So the river Kishon was actually a shallow brook. So it was not a big, powerful river. But in this case, it became a raging torrent. And there's a parallel to the Sea of Reeds. So the Sea of Reeds opened up for the Israelites, closed up on the Egyptians, just like this little tiny brook became a raging torrent to eat up all of the Canaanites who were fighting them. Okay, so we have verse 21, the river Kishon swept them away.
Then,
go ahead.
There we go. Then thundered the horse's hooves, galloping, galloping, go his mighty steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse its people bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty. Most blessed of women, Beiel, the wife of Heber, the Kenite, most blessed of tent-dwelling women. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles, she brought him curdled milk. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head, she shattered and pierced his temple. At her feet he sank, he fell, there he lay. At her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she cried out, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed? The wisest of her ladies answer her. Indeed, she keeps saying to herself, are they not finding and dividing the spoils? A woman or two for each man. Colorful garments as plunder for Sisera. Colorful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my neck, all this as plunder? So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. Then the land had peace 40 years.
Okay, before we look more carefully at the Yael story, what is the mother saying as she's looking through the lattice work? Do you need to see?
She's wondering where he is.
She's wondering where he is, and what is she assuming? Do you want to look at it again? Or Sandy, do you have an idea?
She's assuming that he's still alive and is the victor.
Okay, and what do victors do in these situations? Do you need to see
the women?
I'm sorry?
They raped the women.
They raped the women. They raped the women, and what else did they do?
They get all the plunder.
They take the booty. Okay, that's what she's assuming. She's assuming that he's being victorious. He's raping women, and not only him, but his soldiers are also raping women, and they're taking the booty. So that is the assumption that is made about someone who is a victor. So now we go back to the story of Yael, and I'm going to share with you a part of my paper that I wrote. Okay. So while Devorah leads her people to victory, it is Yael, another strong and independent woman, who undertakes a decisive deed, killing Sisera, the captain of the enemy's army. The story of Yael is told twice, once in prose in chapter 4, as you saw, and then again in poetry in chapter 5. The poem serves a key purpose. The prose version presents Yael as performing an act that is courageous and patriotic, but that also suggests treachery, right? She says, come on into the tent. She's like being very welcoming. And he probably doesn't realize that the Kenites are actually allies of the Israelites. She's just some woman in a tent, So, okay. So it seems a little bit treacherous to invite him in. She says, come on in. I'm going to give you a safe haven. And he's peacefully asleep and vulnerable. And she murders him, right? The poem, on the other hand, told from the perspective of another woman, reframes the tale and redirects our attention. Devorah's song exalts and praises this blessed above all women. As the story is retold, Yael's bravery and honor are increased, and she is not presented as a trickster. There's nothing in there about come on in and I'll give you safe haven, right? It's just, this is what she did. She doesn't entice Sisera in this version. And these Fuel and Gunn are two scholars who say there is no seduction or deceit here, no ambush of a sleeping giant. Now, both versions turn the stereotype of mother on its head. The story unfolds in Yael's tent, a domestic setting. Like a mother, as we pointed out before, Yael gives Sisera milk and covers him with a blanket. However, this promise of motherly comfort is turned into a death warrant. Mike Ball, who's another scholar, refers to this as an instance of anti-mothering. More significantly, however, the poem increases the sexual connotations of the murderous act, and in so doing accomplishes another reversal in the expected role of women. The poem subtly suggests that Yael's action is a kind of rape, and that's why I wanted to talk about what the mother's expectations were, because she's assuming her son is raping women. Well, even though Yael can't exactly rape him, the way the story of the tent peg is portrayed is a kind of rape, if you listen to how Robert Alter explains it. Robert Alter is a scholar at Berkeley. He did a wonderful translation of the whole Tanakh. And he wrote a book called The Art of Biblical Narrative, which I highly, highly recommend if anyone's interested in literary analysis. So the depiction of Sisera's murder by Yael is loaded with sexual imagery and innuendo that convey the suggestion of rape. Robert Alter calls her murder an aggressively phallic assassination. I mean, you have to think about a tent peg going inside something. That's the phallic symbol. To begin with, Yael pounds a tent peg into Sisera's head, a violent, penetrating action, which is repeated 3 times. Sisera's fall is also repeated 3 times in staccato rhythm. Further, as Susan Neidich, another scholar, points out, the words used to convey Sisera's death suggest sexual submission. Sisera falls between Yael's, and unfortunately, I don't have the font anymore for the Hebrew, so it just looks like gibberish, Yael's raglaim. So he's falling between her legs, okay? So that's a very sexual image. And raglaim, legs or feet, are used in scripture as euphemisms for male or female organs. For those of you who know the story of the book of Ruth, Ruth goes to the, to see Boaz in the middle of the night, and she uncovers his feet, which is a euphemism. Neidich also analyzes the verbs that describe his fall. Karach, he bent. Shachav, he lay. Shadud, bereft of life, ruined or despoiled, in the same vein. So it's this very staccato rhythm, the repetition of, the penetrating act and the falling and the specific words that are used. She says, for example, the vast majority of biblical uses of that word shakav in a sexual context refer to illegitimate relations in rape, incest, ritual impurity, adultery, and so forth. Niditch concludes, double meanings of sexuality and death emerge in every line. He is at her feet in a pose of defeat and humiliation. He kneels between her legs in sexual pose. Yael herself is the aggressor, the despoiler. The rape of Sisera can be seen as a payback of sorts for what women are generally subjected to in wartime. Indeed, the Song of Devorah alludes to this gruesome reality in the portrayal of Sisera's mother wondering at the tardiness of her son. She naturally assumes that he and his cohorts are off looking for booty, i.e. captured women, literally wombs they can despoil. As Fuel and Gunn explain, the speech makes explicit what has been implicit in the story, that is, a threat to women during the war. Women on the losing side can expect to be captured and raped if not killed. Hence the poetic justice with which the Israelite singers depict Sisera's death. Yael, as depicted by Devorah, does to Sisera what he would have done to these women, i.e. rape. Mikibal contrasts Sisera's murder to that of the Levite's concubine later in the book. And we're going to read that later. But the murder takes a specific form and meaning of rape. Not only does the weapon entail penetration, it also leads to the same result as the rape of the Levite's concubine. Destroyed by the weapon, she too became none when fallen on the ground. Perhaps the narrator uses Yael's story to avenge this voiceless, nameless woman as well. Okay, somebody put something in the chat. This seems to echo Song of Songs 2:14. I don't know what Song of Songs 2:14 is. Can you read it, please, Teresa?
Hang on just a sec. Okay, so there it says, hark, my beloved, there he comes, leaping over mountains, bounding over hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or like a young stag. There he stands behind our wall, gazing through the window, peering through the lattice.
Okay, there may be a little bit of an echo with the lattice, but the Song of Songs is a very different kind of piece. It's really
Yes.
about love, real love,
Right.
and real supporting each other into being the most wonderful person that they can be with each other's love. It's very, very different. I mean, it's a real contrast. So, you know, maybe there's a reference to the lattice where, you know, he's looking through the lattice as someone he loves that he wants to empower, as opposed to looking through the lattice and saying, hey, my son's probably raping some women. So thank you for that. There might be an intertextual reference. I don't know. So, I mean, even though in some ways, you know, you read the story and you go, oh, this is really horrible. But at the same time, when you think about what men do to women still today during war, you kind of go, well, maybe this is what this guy deserved, right? Any thoughts about yeah, Jane?
Rabbi, I was interested in the fact that Sisera's mother expected him to come back immediately. And I'm linking that up in my head with the fact that he goes into Yael's tent. She's very maternal to him. You know, she relaxes his guard. But I think that, you know, the relationship between Sisera and his mother, I don't know how deeply it's been explored, but she's saying, okay, where is he? Where is he? And it's a woman, you know, a member of her entourage who says, oh, he's probably off raping women and taking the booty and everything. But she obviously expects him to come back right after battle and report to her, you know, everything that's been going on and what a brave man he was and all of that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
You know, so that's I think that's another dimension to the maternal aspect of everything that's in this poem here.
I think that's very nice. Story. Yeah, very nice that, you know, that he's going to Yael, who's, you know, representing this mother figure with the milk and the blanket, and he seems to be very connected to his own mother, which is very interesting. Yeah, that's a nice thing to notice. Jenny.
I think it's interesting that sort of both, if you will, both versions of this incident are preserved. Because, right, there are two very different presentations of a woman and how she interacts with this warrior. I'm just wondering, do we know anything about the different authors or why these two very different versions are kept?
I don't. I can look into it, but I don't. I mean, the thing is, you know, if you look at the Torah and the different strands that are knitted together, where there's sometimes contradiction, why were they kept? For example, in Genesis, at the very beginning, there are two versions of how the world was created. And so the question is, why were both preserved? So there are different theories. I mean, we don't know, but it could be, well, you know, one presents God as really transcendent and far away and unreachable, you know, who creates the world with the word. And the second version, God is imminent, very close, blowing into earth to create a human being. Or you could say, well, one was a northern version and one was a southern version, and you don't want anybody to feel left out.
Right.
So I don't know. I'll look into it. I don't know why both were preserved. I'm going to go to the temple over the weekend, and I have some books there that might be helpful for that. So thanks for asking that question. I'm going to write it down so I don't forget. But her, you know, Devorah's song is a very old song, and I think Debbie Friedman did a really beautiful job creating a song based on hers. The only problem is that song goes through your head nonstop. It's been going through my head since we had that service a few weeks ago. It's going to really stick in there. But yeah, you have these really strong women here at the very beginning of the book of Judges, which I do want you to remember, because when we get to the end of the book of Judges, it's absolutely the opposite, as was indicated towards the end of what I read. That's chapter 19. So hopefully we'll get there before the end of, you know, this period when we're studying Tanakh. Interestingly, in the Apocrypha, which is in the Catholic Bible, not in the Protestant or the Jewish Bible, there's also the story of Judith, who does something very similar with a general named Holofernes. She also entices him and then cuts his head off. Now, that was not included in the Tanakh by the rabbis. And, you know, you have to wonder why they included one and not the other, but they also didn't include the book of the two books of the Maccabees. You know, they didn't tell us why, but, you know, part of it is that they maybe didn't want to emphasize too much victory over some kind of big, powerful army, because that might encourage people to fight against the Roman Empire a second time, which would not be good. Any other comments about Devorah and Yael? No? Okay, so I guess we'll go on with the next chapter. But I mean, this is a really, really powerful chapter here. And then you see that at the end, there are 40 years of peace, thanks to Devorah and Yael. She got rid of the general. So, okay.
I guess I just had one other thought that thought it was interesting how, in a sense, Devorah and Yael worked like as a tag team.
Mm-hmm.
I just also thought that was also very interesting.
And remember that, you know, Barak, the general on our side, was told that, you know, victory will be delivered by the hands of a woman. So this is the beginning of this new phase of political organization. It's a confederacy of tribes. You have all these people who normally wouldn't be in power. You now had a woman. You're not going to have another one again. They're gone now. The women are now going to be in positions that aren't as elevated, shall we say. So now we have to go to the next judge, which is Gideon, so chapter 6. Who would like to read this?
I can do it.
Sandy, thank you.
Okay, let me put my glasses on here.
And you're going to see that as it starts, after 40 years of peace and prosperity, the Israelites are going to screw up again.
Of course.
And then God will punish them again and then bring another leader to help them out.
The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds.
Okay, one
Whenever-
second. Do you remember what Midian is? Who came from Midian? Anybody remember?
Jethro?
Yes, Jethro,
Mhm.
Moses's father-in-law, was from Midian.
Yeah.
And so at that point, Midian was a good place. But then remember that when Balak hired Balaam to curse the Israelites, and he was not successful in doing that, all he could do was praise them. Then later on, Balaam, the prophet, seemed to have convinced the Midianites, among others, to lure the Israelite men into sexual encounters that were forbidden in the temple, most probably, although there wasn't a temple at the time. But so Midian has turned into an enemy at this point. All right, we'll go back to the text. So the Israelites are hiding.
Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites,
Amalekites, that was another big enemy. Amalek, remember, they're very, very bad. We hate them.
Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza, and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep, nor cattle, nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help.
Okay, so what the Midianites are doing is they're not only attacking the Israelites, they are performing a scorched earth policy, destroying everything in their path. So according to the more traditional commentary, the punishment here is worse than it was before because the Israelites sinned even further, right? And so now the Israelites are calling out for help, just the way they did when they were slaves in Egypt. Help us, right?
Mhm.
When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah,
Yeah.
that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in the Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour, he made bread without yeast. Putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered to him under the oak. The angel of God said to him, Take the meat and unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth. And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die."
So when you face God face to face, it's very scary because, you know, you could die, right? Remember, Moses couldn't see God face to face, but this is just an angel.
So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it, "The Lord is Peace." To this day, it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That same night, the Lord said to him, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." What's
So
that?
remember, so Baal is a Canaanite god, and Asherah is the female consort. And so they would build, you know, poles to represent Asherah. And so, of course, this is absolutely a forbidden thing to have an altar to Baal and the Asherah pole. So, you know, one of the things that these judges have to do is get rid of this other cult.
Then build a proper altar, kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime.
What is he afraid of, do you think? Don't look ahead.
They could kill him.
Why would they kill him?
He destroyed the bulls.
Yeah, he's destroyed their gods.
Yeah, so here they are, you know, worshiping this other god, and he's going to get rid of it because God told him to. And they're going to be really angry at him, right? Okay. So he's supposed to build a proper altar, and he does this at night.
Okay.
Are you okay still reading?
Yeah, I'd rather somebody else read.
Okay, does somebody else want to pick it up? It's a long chapter. Jason, you want to read?
I can do it. Where are we
Thank
at? I forgot what
28, verse
Okay.
28.
In the morning, when the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, "Who did this?" When they carefully investigated, they were told, "Gideon, son of Joash, did it." The people of the town demanded of Joash, "Bring out your son. He must die, because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it." But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, "Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar." So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerub-Baal that day, saying, "Let Baal contend with him." Now all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet them. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." And that is what happened. Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew." That night God did so. Only the fleece was dry. All the ground was covered with dew.
Thank you. So what do we think about this guy Gideon?
Well, the business with the fleece reminds me of all of the tricks that Moses did in Pharaoh's court to convince them that his God was greater than Pharaoh's gods.
Nice,
And
nice.
right off the top of my head.
Right. Well, who is Moses trying to convince at this point when all these tricks are happening?
He's trying to convince the Pharaoh.
Right.
I think, and the radical Jane says he's trying to convince himself, but that's another issue.
Well, but what is it? That's what Gideon is doing here. Gideon, I mean, I'm really surprised, as a matter of fact, that God keeps indulging him, because, you know, he keeps saying, well, if you're really God, do this. Okay, well, I need one more proof. Well, how about one more? So he doesn't seem to really trust God all that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another way you could interpret it if you wanted to be kind to Gideon, which is that it's not that he's trying to make sure that God is really, you know, on his side, but that he is worthy of God selecting him. And so he's, you know, well, do you really want me to do it? But it just seems like he's not a very trusting guy. And, you know, he's really not somebody that you sort of would look up to in terms of how the Bible is written, right? I mean, usually, you know, God says to Abraham, take your son, kill him. Does Abraham say, well, prove to me that you're really God? Right? No, he just goes ahead and does it. But here, oh yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was struck that he first did this whole thing with the altar, and then later he's asking for these proofs. Like, it feels backwards to me. Like, he was ready to do this dramatic act first, and then later he still needed.
But yeah, exactly.
Am I missing something in the order?
No, but he also he says to him, "For the broth and
I mean, he does all these things with the building the altar and sacrifices and all these acts for the angel, but it's like, why does he need more later, since he's already taken these dramatic steps and put his life at risk? And then it's like, oh yeah, wait, I still need more proof. I've already done all this dramatic stuff.
Well, in 17, he says, if I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign. So he is asking for some kind of proof before he does the altar. But you're right. Once that happens, then he sort of has second thoughts, like, okay, I did that, but I'm not so sure. Show me again. And, you know, okay, now you've shown me that. Let me make it even harder. Have the dew go on the grass and not on the fleece, which is a harder thing to do. So it's like, once he's gotten the proof, he should go forward, right? But he's still not sure. So he's, you know, he's kind of a complicated figure, not someone that you would necessarily feel is like a fervent believer in God. Not that we necessarily want someone to be. Go
is
ahead.
this the same Gideon that they named the group after, that puts the Bibles in all the hotel rooms? I mean, I'm just kind of wondering if that's the same.
It must
because
be.
You know, the way you just described it, not the most fervent believers. If you would think you would name after someone who was the most fervent of believers,
You would think
were
so.
looking for a name, if you were a religious society and you read the text, right? You would think.
I just noticed, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt with the parenthesis that you're wearing. I'm silently correcting your grammar t-shirt. I love it. I never have had the nerve to wear that myself. I have one too. Well, you know, it's interesting because I was thinking, and not to cast any aspersions on anybody, but like people name, like, okay, Mara means bitter. And lots of people name their daughters Mara, right? And you think, why would you name your daughter bitter? I mean, it happens to be a name in the Bible. So, or even Omri, because Omri was the father of Ahab. And Ahab was not a very loved king by those who wrote the Bible, right? He was a very successful king, politically and economically. And we haven't gotten there yet, but you know, he was married to Jezebel, which you may remember, and she's not a favorite of the Bible either. And Omri is the father, so there's a whole dynasty that rules for like 50 years or something in the Northern Kingdom, and they're very negatively portrayed. in the Bible. So if you choose to name your son Omri, I mean, so yeah, it's interesting that people pick names in the Bible. I'm not sure why sometimes, I mean, maybe they just like the sound of the name. It's not necessarily connected to who that person represents. And I can't imagine that the Gideon Society is anything other than named after this particular judge.
So there's a famous book that's studied by both Kabbalists and Musar students called The Palm Tree of Devorah.
Yes.
By Rabbi Cordovero. It was written in the 1500s, I think. And it's all about the divine attributes and about trying to model yourself after the divine attributes. And now this is the first time I've actually read the entire piece about Deborah, and I'm not making the deep connection here that would have inspired Cordovero to name his book after her tree. Like, what is it about that would make you pick The Palm Tree of Devorah as your title of a book about divine attributes? Like, I'm having that connection isn't fully forming for me. And I'm wondering if anybody else gets that idea. Why is that a mystical? Why is that a,
Well, I don't know the answer except for the fact that she is very highly, admired because she was a prophetess and a poet and a singer and a general and a judge. And by the way, okay, so we've got a couple things in the chat, which will answer a couple questions, which I will look in a minute. But she, according to the traditional commentary, by the way, when she sat under the palm tree, it was all open, and that's why she sat under a palm tree outside, so she'd never be secluded with a man, right? You're not supposed to be a woman and a man secluded in any way for fear that adultery could be going on. All right, let's see what people put in the chat. Okay, let's see.
Can I say something, Rabbi?
Please.
Didn't the judges usually sit in the gates of the city and not out in the open like that?
Well, that would be the case if there was a city, I guess, but maybe they didn't have a city at that point.
I just wondered if she wasn't allowed to sit there, and so she went somewhere else, and that could be the significance of the palm tree.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I have a lot of homework to do after all this. Okay. I will look, but I just assume that they really weren't urbanized at this point. The gates of the city is later, but let me look. Okay, this is from Doug. Gideon was a man who was willing to do exactly what God wanted him to do, regardless of his own judgment as to the plans and results. Humility, faith, and obedience were his great elements of character. This is the standard that the Gideons International is trying to establish in all its members, each man to be ready to do God's will at any time, at any place, and in any way that the Holy Spirit leads. That's on their website. Okay, thank you, Doug. So despite his own misgivings, he's still doing what God wants, right? And that's what we want everyone to do. Just be just like Abraham, willing to kill your kid. Okay, thanks, Doug. Okay, and is that it? Oh, that was the only thing. Okay. So, yeah, Devorah's palm tree, why that became a mystical thing, I don't know. I know of the book, but I can't say why she was the person chosen. I mean, the Shekhinah, which is the presence of God in the world, is female. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I will look that up as well. Any other questions that I can give myself homework for? Okay. All right, so we're going to go on with the next chapter. Now, we're still with Gideon. Gideon gets a little more press here than some of the other people. So he's going to be successful. Does anyone want to read?
I'll read.
Okay, every single time I go back to this, we get a free book of prayers from Pastor Greg Laurie. Okay. No thanks. Okay, thank you, Susie.
Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me.
Okay, stop for just 1 second. What is the issue here? Why does God not want so many men? Sandy.
Because he wants the victory to be from him, not
Exactly.
from a lot of people.
Exactly. So if it were a lot of people, then they could say, well, look, we had this huge army. Of course, we were able to defeat the Midianites. But with a small army, well, it must be God, right? I mean, this is not the most positive portrayal of God, who wants the credit, right? And by the way, since we're still in Passover, the traditional reason for all these plagues and why they get worse and worse and worse, and why eventually God hardens Pharaoh's heart, is so that God can show how strong God is, right? And powerful. Again, not the most lovely portrait of God, but that's, again, human beings who wrote this, and that's how they understand God. It's not necessarily who God is. Okay, thank you. And okay, this is 3.
Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained.
Which, by the way, the code of war, which is in the book of Deuteronomy, actually says that this is what you're supposed to do. If anybody is afraid, you tell them to go away. Now, apparently there are 22,000 men who are afraid. I mean, you don't want them out there because they're not going to be good soldiers, and they're going to, demoralize all the other people. Okay, please go. Oops, sorry, go on.
But the Lord said to Gideon, there are still many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. If I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog from those who kneel down to drink. 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest got down to their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that tap, I will save you and give you the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites home, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. Now the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley.
Okay, thank you. We're going to stop for just a moment. All right, believe me, this is not easy to determine. Why did he pick the people who cupped their hands instead of the ones who lapped, who kneeled down and licked the water with their tongues?
Because they were watching for the enemy.
Exactly. Did you figure that out yourself?
I'm not sure. I might have heard it a long time ago.
Okay. Because I'm thinking to myself, what is the difference? I thought, okay, yeah, the ones who lap like a dog, of course you don't want them, but the ones who cup their hands. So by kneeling down and cupping their hands, they're still able to be alert to an enemy being there. Whereas the ones who kneel down can't see what's going on. I mean, it's not a test that I would ever give anybody. But apparently that's how God determined that those are the ones who are smart and alert enough, right? Because they're going to be thirsty at some point, and they need to stay alert to what's going on around them. So now we have 300 men. Okay, so now we're over here, verse 9.
During that night, the Lord said to Gideon, get up, go down against the camp, because I'm going to give it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. Afterwards, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. So he and Purah, his servant, went down to the outposts of the camp. The Midianites and the Amalekites and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley, thick as locusts. Their camels could not move could not more be counted than the sand on the seashore.
In other words, there are a lot of people on the other side, right? They're thick as locusts and they're camels. There's so many you can't even count them against these 300 men. Go ahead.
Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. I had a dream, he was saying. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed down and worshiped. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them with torches inside. "Watch me," he told them, "follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." Gideon and the 300 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars, grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow. They shouted, "A sword to the Lord and for Gideon." While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth Shittah towards Zerah as far as the border of Abel Meolah near Tabbath. Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and the Manasseh were called out and they pursued the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim saying, "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth Barah." So all the men of Ephraim were called out and they seized the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth Barah. They also captured 2 of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb on the rock of Oreb and Zeb in the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan.
Thank you. So what does Gideon do here? How does he manage to win this war? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, the
He's-
men in the valley turned on each other. So some of them were killed off and some of them ran away.
Okay, so that happens afterwards, but somebody, was that Dan or who else was there?
He's using trumpets to sort of amplify the size of this attacking force to make it seem bigger.
Exactly. What it's using. Actually, when I was in Israel many years ago, we were on the Golan Heights, and somebody was telling us about the war. I can't remember whether it was. I think it was 73, when the Israelites or the Israelis at this point were way outnumbered, and they weren't really ready. But they got up on the hill, and I can't remember what they did, but they did something where they they made it seem like there were more tanks available to them than there were by doing something with the lights. I don't remember the details, but it's a very similar story where you make it seem like the enemy here is surrounded by a much bigger force than they actually have. Normally an army has one trumpet, so he has all these different trumpets and they're all surrounding the area, making it seem like there's this huge force around them. So he's using a sechel as opposed to any kind of real military force. And that's how they win. And that's how Israelis have won too. It's not always just by superior force, but by, really using, intelligent ways of deceiving the enemy. Yes, Sherry.
What is the purpose of breaking the jars?
I think it's also to make it sound like, I was just looking this in the, this is
Noise.
so it's what it says here. Oh wait, this is the wrong one. Okay, so it says here, this is the traditional commentary. Gideon included shofar blasts and torches to recall the merit of the revelation at Sinai, when God caused a shofar blast to be heard and the mountain to be enveloped in flame. That's according to Rashi. In the plain sense, although God had promised him success, Gideon planned his strategy according to the principle that, to whatever degree possible, one should employ natural means so as to minimize the need for an open miracle. It could also be that Gideon didn't completely believe that God would help him win, but he's also just using his brains. He reasoned that having seen the 32,000 Jewish soldiers disperse, the Midianites would have relaxed their vigilance. Okay, so that happened before, which would make it easier for him to surprise and terrify the Midianite army so that their military discipline would break down. And that's what you said, Sandy. Once they thought, oh dear, we're outnumbered, they just started, running into each other. Gideon divided his men into 3 spearheads and surrounded the enemy camp. He left an opening on the 4 sides so the Midianites could flee. Rather than be forced to stand and fight desperately for their lives, he gave each soldier a torch and a jug with which to cover it so that they could approach the camp undetected. In addition, he timed his assault to coincide with the changing of the guard before the new watch had become organized. When he gave the signal, his men would simultaneously shout, smash their jugs to make a loud noise, and reveal the torches, because the jugs held the torches, and blow their shofars. Since armies normally have 1 torchbearer and bugler for many soldiers, the Midianites would think they were surrounded by a huge force, probably suspecting that all 32,000 Jews had hidden in the hills and had now regrouped in a surprise attack. Confused and frightened in the darkness, the Midianites were terrified. They swung their swords against one another and fled. So these jugs were to hold the torches. And once they took the torches out, I guess you smash the jug because you don't need it anymore. And also, the sound probably was also, scary on some level. The one about, selecting the people who cupped their hands to drink the water. Most commentators agree that those who knelt were excluded from the army because their posture indicated that they were in the habit of prostrating themselves to idols. According to another commentary, they were disqualified because they lacked the self-respect to avoid rushing headlong to the water. Men without such self-discipline would have been likely not to have the strength of character to resist social pressure to worship idols. It's very funny because, there are 2 interpretations. One is that the men who bowed down were bowing down as though they were bowing to idols, as opposed to the ones who cupped their hands were able to make sure that there were no enemies around. So it's 2 different ways of understanding the same thing. So it really reminded me of what the Israelis did on the Golan Heights to defeat the Syrian army. They really have done this for a very long time. But what strikes me here is, did you think, like, if you hadn't read the Bible closely or all that much, did you think there was so much in the Bible that has to do with war? I mean, starting with Deuteronomy, then Joshua, Judges, and it's going to continue. What do you think about that? I mean, this is this holy sacred book that we read. We don't read this section necessarily much in synagogues, but what does that tell you? I mean, the sacred book is about war to a great extent.
think it
Well,
explains a lot why people may feel like they can justify war, conflict, tribalism, us versus them. You know, if it's all there in the Bible, then maybe it's okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jane, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that even though the Jews consider themselves the chosen people, you have to fight to continue to be the chosen people. I mean,
Okay.
you know, and historically, war is a part of society. I don't know any society, any culture, any history of any nation that doesn't have war as part of its background. I think it's very realistic.
Okay. But I'm just wondering, you know, when you think of a sacred text, is that what you think of? Like, you know, all these wars and battles and
I'm
actually,
just surprised that God ordered some of these killings.
right. Well, remember in Deuteronomy and in Joshua, right? It's you go kill all your enemies. Don't leave anybody standing. Destroy their towns and their villages and, you know, sometimes kill all their women and children at the same time. Again, we have to remember this was not written by God. This was written by human beings, right? So it's not as though we're saying, oh yeah, God ordered this. This is human, as you said, Jane, it's realistic in the sense that this is how human beings behave. And clearly they're justifying it by saying God is the one who told us to do this, which maybe they really thought so, right? I mean, I'm assuming that the people who wrote this had some sense that they were directed by God, but that's the case also with jihadists and the crusaders and other people who've done this kind of, right? And unfortunately, today, even in Israel, the more, you know, right-wing, very religious also believe that it's okay to kick out the Palestinians and take over the entire, you know, historical land of Israel. And they feel like, well, yeah, as you said, Jenny, you know, it's if the Bible tells us it's okay, right? Although I do remind you that the Talmud says that the people that we're supposed to drive out and kill no longer exist, and therefore it is no longer a, you know, real directive from God, because those people are gone. The Midianites and the Amalekites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and all those people, they're not around anymore. And they don't say, well, they're replaced by the Palestinians. So that's a whole other story.
But the texture of this part of the Tanakh is so different from the 5 books of Moses. I mean, when you say the sacred text, that's what I think of is the 5 books of Moses. I don't think of this section at all as sacred. I think of it as history. Am I wrong in that?
Well, it's considered sacred. It's sacred scripture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and even, you know, even in the 5 books, you have wars as well. They're not quite as extensively described, but you still have wars.
But there are rules about wars.
Yes.
Didn't
Well,
Nidus write a book about that, about the rules of war? Like you
Yes.
can't cut down fruit trees, for example.
Right, right. And
No?
so remember that the traditional commentators, which I just read, said that when they laid siege to the Midianites, they surrounded around 3 sides and they left one open for them to escape, because that's one of the rules of war. Now, it doesn't say that in the book of Judges.
Mm-hmm.
It says it in the commentary.
Ah.
Okay. You're also supposed to first offer peace, but they were attacked.
Yeah.
Now, but they were attacked because they sinned and they're being punished. That's why they're being attacked, as a punishment. And that's this whole, you know, rhythm of the history is.
So are we supposed to look as war upon war as a punishment for our sins, as opposed to wanting land, being greedy, global capitalism? You know, I mean, where are we on this question?
Well, if you were a very religious person, you would see all of these disasters as punishment. That if you had been good, you would not have been attacked. We know that that's not necessarily
not true.
right. But you know that people said, oh, the reason Katrina happened was because homosexuality was being practiced in New Orleans, or, you know, decadent lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
Or even the Satmar rabbi said that the Holocaust was because the Jews
Yeah,
were
it's
assimilated in Germany, right? I mean, that's not my theology, but it is the theology of people who are very sort of fundamentalist, you know, that God's in charge, and if bad, what, you look at the book of Job. What did Job's friends say to him? You're suffering, therefore you must have done something wrong because this is punishment, right? It couldn't be random. It certainly couldn't be because God made a bet with the prosecuting angel,
Right.
which is the real reason that things happened to him. We know that there are random acts out there. You know, you walk in the wrong place on a sidewalk and a beam falls down on your head and kills you. Is that because you were a bad person? Right? You get cancer because you happen to be living in an environment that is, you know, really polluted. Is that punishment? You're being punished for living there, you know? So that's not the theology that I live by, but it is the theology that some people live by because it explains things, right? It's not random, it is purposeful. Therefore, I understand it. And maybe I can have some control over it, because if I'm good, maybe these bad things won't happen to me. We know that that's not how the world really works, right? Did you want to say something, Jason?
Oh, you know, I was just going to follow on something Jane said about it feeling like history. And I get a much more simplistic sense too, that there was a really great value in calling your history a holy book, because, you know, the thing about history is written by the winners, right? It's a way of saying you can't argue with this history. It's in our holy text. It's obviously true. There's no disputing it. And it stamps it with some sort of, you know, what do you call it? An imprimatur of religiosity. So it's not an arguable history. It's a definitive holy history, right? And then it becomes part of your tradition, and then it becomes accepted as a truth, regardless of what else it might have been. But it was the one that would then be passed forward. And if you kept it as sort of a separate, I mean, I'm kind of thinking of like how the Iliad is kind of both a religious story and a war story, and, you know, and it became the piece that got passed on through their generations as well. It's the one we remember. And if they were separate, if it was just a war story, maybe it would not have gotten the same, right? But because it involved all the gods and all of those other things, it lasted more, perhaps because it was part of the story of the gods as well as the story of the people. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, you're right. I think, as Jane said, it's realistic. And then there's this, you know, religious overtone to it. And so it legitimizes what was done. Okay, it's 11:31, so we're going to stop. Our next class is on the 17th, and we'll move on to chapter 8. And then we have a couple sessions in May and one in June. Maybe we'll finish the book of Judges. That would be kind of nice, because I'd like to be able to get to the last chapter so we can compare the beginning to the end. What was the name of the book I recommended? The Art of Biblical Narrative by Robert Alter. It's a literary analysis of the Bible. Sherry, yes?
I have a question about the movie next Saturday
Okay.
that I registered for. So it's available from Saturday and Sunday. I'm not sure how this works.
Well, if you registered, did you get a password?
Not yet. It said it'll come in on the
Okay,
10th.
so when you get the password, then you're able to watch it anytime between the 10th and the 12th.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So just wait for the password.
Yeah, it's this film called Resistance about Marcel Marceau. So if anybody wants to see it, just please, you have to RSVP so that you can get a password for it. That's the way they're doing it, which is very annoying.
So that's different than what's on Thursday at 6 o'clock.
Yes, Thursday is a talk by Alison Owings about the German women during World War II. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
See you soon.
Shabbat shalom.
Okay, bye.